Alright, so we're back. Now here's our soapstone flywheel pump drill. The pressure bar brace is bamboo. Okay. Now if you just happen to pick up the 3/8 inch fluted dowel pins, now I asked you to make the flywheel, the hard plastic flywheel from the bamboo chopstick. Well, the bamboo chopstick is about 10 millimeters, right? Well, if you were to happen to scarf joint the bottom of this for receiving reloads, like my soapstone one is, if you see, it's held in place with a 1/2 inch hose clamp, and I took one of the fluted dowel pins and I put one of those on here. And we're going to use our pine board again. Now this is already mated and it has a notch in it. I filled it with some dust just because I thought it was a little high. Now if you look really close, you'll see that the plane of the soapstone is off. It's not perfectly horizontal. But the other thing too is, you'll notice the mass of the soapstone is not equal throughout its diameter. There's more mass to one side, and you can see that it is spinning off its axis because of that. Okay, so we're just gonna keep going with this. Get it warmed up. And just keep going. You see it's smoking really good now. Get that dust forming in the notch. Keep going, keep going. Got plenty of energy to keep going. That's what's great about the pump drill. More pieces, less efforts. More pieces, less efforts. And if you're going the other way, less pieces, more effort. If you were to do a hand drill or something like that, okay? All right. Oh, almost. Let's keep going. And it looks like I might be using a little too much pressure, so I'm going to back up on pressure and just go for a little bit more speed. Although it's tough because you can see the axis is really off on the flywheel. So it makes it to be a little bit unstable. It doesn't have that smoothness to it, which you'll see in some other pump drills I'm going to show. Some just work so sweetly. It's almost like you're not doing anything at all, like it's no work at all. And nothing for our effort. So what I'm going to do is flatten our dowel pin, and it's starting to loosen up a little bit, so we have to balance that out. Tighten that down. Let's see if getting rid of some of that dead space center is going to help. Now there's a lot of friction, so we gotta get its action back again. a little better. And we have to warm it up all over again. Now I'm really gonna back up on pressure. I'm really kind of just gonna hold the pump drill in place and just keep pumping with speed. I'm only using enough pressure to keep it in place. All right, let's see how we did. And nothing. All right. So it could be that these wood pins are hard to the point where 1/2 inch of diameter of surface area is good, but not 3/8. It could be, but I could keep it experimenting. All right. But for now, we're going to move on to the bamboo spindle with the hard plastic wheel. All right. And this does not have a reload attached to it. So essentially when this burns down, I need a brand new spindle and create this thing all over again, which is why you want reloads in the first place. All right. Because you don't want to go about making a whole new set each and every time. So we're going to use the same hole. Let's see if we can't just light this up. So first I need to work it so that it fits. Almost. Gotta capture that rhythm. And here's a perfect example of when you don't have enough mass for that centrifugal force. It just stops. Having enough mass for centrifugal force is very key. Got to keep everything in balance. Here we're going for speed. Not too much pressure because we don't have a lot of surface area either. And we got our coal. Okay. It could just be that the wood of the dowel pin doesn't work at that surface area of 3/8 of an inch. Not too shabby, right? Got one more to show you. And that's my Japanese cylinder from the department store. Okay, let me widen out the camera and we're going to do this one and then we're going to keep moving. So here's our Japanese one, and it's already been mated, has a notch in it. I know it works already because I practiced with it. Now this is the 1/2 inch dowel pin again in here. And you should be able to almost feel the mass that's on the cylinder flywheel with this piece of heavy steel bar. I mean, it's got a lot of centrifugal force, a lot. But what's important though is that the mass is balanced all around the flywheel. That's what's very key. Okay, let's see how we did. And we have us a coal already. It's nice when all your devices are in balance. Plenty of energy, could just keep going, could go longer, but pretty significant with how we're going up in that scale that I created. More pieces, less effort. Hand drill, mouth drill, bow drill, pump drill, and after this, towel drill. You're really gonna like. Okay. So one of the important things I really didn't mention was measuring out your flywheel, okay? And this is really a key issue. The first thing you should have is material that is pretty much equal throughout. For example, this piece of 2x8, this piece of plank. Now, looking at it sideways, okay, it's completely equal throughout. Okay, it's not heavier to one side than it is another, but that is also based on where the hole is. Okay, so now you could put a hole pretty much anywhere in this plank, but then you have to figure out where the mass is. So here's what I'm going to say. Don't measure out your mass and then drill a hole. You have to go based on what you can fix and what you can't fix. Now, once you drill your hole, you can't move your hole over. Your hole, once you do that, let's say is permanent, and that's fixed. Well, then you need to work around that. So here's what I recommend. First, get your material, which should be have equal mass throughout in a sense, okay, like this. Then you put your hole in. Well, let's say you put your hole and it's offset. I don't know if you could see, but this hole is not equally in the center of this plank. So I kind of drew it out for you that it's not. All right. Well, here's the thing. Let's say you're going to do kind of a circle. All right. Let's say you want a circle. Well, you cut your hole, but you see that your mass is off. So you take your dowel that you're going to use, and you take a string or a piece of wire, and you insert that dowel into your hole, and then you take a pencil or a pen, and you tie that wire or that string to that pencil or pen, and from there, fix that. And from there, from your shortest point, what you think is your shortest point, you're going to measure out from. It's not turning. Hold on a second. We're going to measure out from. In a way, this is like using a compass, a mechanical drawing compass. Okay? And with that, you get your circle that you need to cut out if you're going to do it that way. Or, if, this could be any kind of pattern. It could be a star pattern. You could draw yourself a snowflake. You could be as artistic as you want. You may want the classic circle. Well, now you just put this on your bandsaw or your jigsaw, and you try to cut it out as equally as you can. Now, here's the thing. With your mass, you could take off, but you can't put back on. All right? But either way, the balancing point, the point of measurement, is the dowel, the hole. Okay? Now here in this instance, we're going to do a rectangle. So from that dowel point, we measure out equally all the sides that you want, and you take off the rest of the mass that you don't need. Okay? So first the hole, then the mass. Don't do the mass, and then the hole. What if you measure out your mass, and you misdrill the hole, like I've done in the past? Okay. Now here's an example of a Cedar Round that I found at the school that I used to work at. Someone was going to make a punctual out of this, but I found this abandoned, and I could see why. They wanted to do the hole from, you can see this concentric rings on here. They wanted to do it from the hole of the middle concentric ring. Well, the concentric rings are not even because the tree did not grow evenly. Now, as nice as that would look, it's not a perfect bullseye. So the mass is off either way. Plus, when you look at it horizontally, it's not an even cut, and there's too much mass to one side anyway. It's heavier on one side than it is another. So here's what I'm going to tell you from experience. Do your hole, okay, then figure out your mass and find the balance that way. Because your point of measurement is the hole, is the dowel, to figure out where all the mass needs to be equally distributed. It's not the other way around. That's a cart before the horse issue, and you don't want to do that. All right? Alright, so we talked about the flywheel, but the other device I need to clarify with you is the pressure bar brace. The pressure bar brace, there's really two important things you really need to know. One is that your hole here, and you can see these are different sizes, right? The hole here that the spindle goes through can't be a tight fit. When you're pressing down on the bar, that if you tilt this one way or the other, okay, and this is a tight fit, that's actually going to cause like braking. It's actually going to slow it down because there's going to be sidewall friction if this hole is literally right up against the spindle. So if you were to tilt this either way, it's actually going to rub up against the spindle and it's going to slow it down, stop it. So this hole has to be big enough. This hole has to be big enough that allows a lot of room, that allows for if the bar goes from side to side a little bit. Okay, it can't have any sidewall friction. There has to be plenty of room. The other thing is, this is really the weak point of the pressure bar brace. Now, you have a pretty strong mass throughout, except for the middle. And so really, these two connecting points that circumvent the hole for the spindle, if it's going to break somewhere on the pressure bar brace, it's going to be right here somewhere. Oh. Because there's less mass here to support it. Unless you have a definite crack or a weak spot somewhere else. But this is going to be mainly your weak area. Okay. Your pressure bar brace should also be thick enough this way that it doesn't bend too much. Okay. This bamboo here, it's so thick, it's like literally 10 millimeters thick, that it doesn't bend at all. It really doesn't bend, so it's stout enough to pull off the job. And there's enough material right here alongside of alongside the holes, that I know that this is not going to break. Okay. Here, this hole, actually it turns out is a little small than I would like it to be, so we're going to open that up a little bit, and to prevent breaking. Some sidewall friction, bad friction, that's being caused when it rubs up against the spindle from this tilted. Okay. And the last thing is that half of your bar brace should be your 3 measurements. So 3, 4, 5. 4 is your spindle. 3 should be your pressure bar brace to one side, and then you have your 5. So your pressure bar brace measurement is always the 3 measurement times 2. So you have to remember that when you cut this out. So, you know, you get in your 4 measurement, and you go, well, let's say your 4 measurement is 12 inches. And you want to make your 3 measurement 9 inches. So your 5 is going to be, if your 4 measurement is 12 inches, and you want your 3 measurement to be 11 inches, that means your 5 measurement is going to be 13 inches. But when you go to cut out your pressure bar brace, you can't go, my number is 11. You have to go, it's 22. So you have to double that. Alright, so keep that in mind. Really, my favorite way to string a pressure bar brace is to just knock it. You really want to be able to take these cords on and off whenever you can. They really don't slip off accidentally while you're drilling, while you're pumping. Anyway, so usually they're wedged in there pretty good with the pressure of it going up and down. If you want to do the whole thing, drill a hole and put a string through, that's fine. If you want to get a little bit more artistic, practically it's more work. So I find the knot method, the slot method, is more practical and easier to use, especially for demonstrations if you need to fix something right away. Okay. And that's really all you need to know about a pressure bar brace. Again, like the flywheel, if you can, drill your hole, and then from there, measure out your 3 on each side, and then cut. In case you accidentally, you cut yourself your 11 and your 11, your 22 total, and you go to drill your hole, and then it's off. Well, now what? So first you should drill your hole, then do your measurement, and then cut the sides. So get your mass balanced after you know what the balance point is, which is the hole, which receives the spindle. Okay, flywheel, pressure bar brace. Drill your hole first if you can, and then measure out and adjust your mass if necessary. Okay, that's really the more practical way to do it, and the keeps you sane. It's the saner way to do it too as well. All right, so let's keep going. Alright, and welcome to Art of the Variation of the Pump Drill. And before I show you some of the pump drills I made just by playing around, I want to show you my reloading base. Now you saw probably the first introduction of that with the giant drill of this huge block of cedar which fits inside this frame. Well, that idea came from this idea here, which was when you make as many fires as I do, you get tired of making bases over and over and over again and trying to fix them, and you have a whole collection of them. And obviously the idea came from reloads that go in the spindles, but why not a reloading base, right? So here's my prototype. I have better looking ones which you can do, but this is the first one I ever made, so I'm showing you this one. And how I made this was, I got a piece of 2x4, which, as you know, is not 2x4 but 3.5 by 1.5. And I cut that in half lengthwise. Okay, so basically you have one section that's, after it's cut, is 5/8 of an inch wide, and another one that's 5/8 of an inch wide. Okay, so I took one and I modeled this after making reloads out of pieces of 2x4. Now 2x4s, as you know, are 3.5 inch by 1.5 inch. Well, a really good size for what you need for a reloading base, in my opinion, is just 1.5 inches squared. So if I took a 2x4, which was free of knots, okay, this one has a knot in it, free of knots, fairly straight grained, okay. Now if I ran this down my table saw, okay, and I made down the 1.5 inch length, if I ran them down and made 5/8 of an inch blocks of 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch by 5/8, I could make reloads for a base. So what I did was I recessed this piece of 2x4, which is 5/8 of an inch in width. Okay, now I put it on my router. A router, if you don't know, cuts grooves in wood, and you could pull this off too as well with a table saw if you don't have a router, but you have to be very careful. And then you'll have some other cutting to do. So I set the depth at 1/4 inch. So I cut in 1/4 inch, and I made these cuts, and what they do is they fit like a puzzle. They fit these 1.5 inch blocks. All right. And as you can see, they have grooves on each side. Well, these are for the notches. Okay. So I'm going to show you how this is done. I have these 2 hole grooves on the side here. You can see groove here and a groove here. This is so when I'm outside, I can pin the board to the ground. If I'm doing, say, a mouth drill and I can't hold the board, or I'm doing a hand drill or something like that, and I can't kneel on it correctly, or I don't want to kneel on it, I just pin it to the ground, right? I also have some flat spaces here on the side, okay? And what those are for when I'm on my table, I clamp it down, okay? And I clamp it down on both sides. Very quick and easy. So I have 3 reloads here, and you notice that I have spaces for notches in front, back, and on the sides, basically in all 4 quarters. So if I'm doing a bow drill or a hand drill, I have the notch facing me. If I'm doing mouth drill and I need to see over the other side, I have a notch on that side. If I feel like I want to do the notch east or west, right or left, then I'll do it that way. So if I'm stepping on the board, then I'll use, if I'm stepping on the board, then I'll use one on this side. And if I'm doing mouth drill or hand drill, I could just do one in the center if I want to, or pump drill, which is what I'm going to show you now, actually. So this is my prototype. I have ones that are better looking than this, but I'm going to give you the plans on how to make something like this. I'm going to demonstrate with this one. All right. So how this one's going to go is we're going to clamp that down. And the first pump drill I'm going to show you is a pulley wheel. Now, you know my wife has chickens because you've heard the chickens in the back. So we go to a place called Tractor Supply, and they have all kinds of farm implements there. Well, this is a pulley wheel, like for a clothesline or something like that. See the groove down the center of it there? And it has spokes like a wheel. Now this dowel, it's an oak dowel that I got at the hardware store, and it fit through the hole, and I believe it's 3/4 of an inch. It is 5/8 of an inch. So the hole is 5/8 of an inch. I put an oak dowel through it, and here's how I pinned it. What I like to do is, with some of my wheels, is I'll put a groove on the bottom, and what that does is that is a slot for a nail. Okay, so I'll put a hole through the dowel for the nail. The nail will stick out like this, and then the wheel will come down and it'll sit on the groove on the nail, and now it's connected to the spindle. Okay, and that's what this one is here. Maybe hard to see, but there's a nail that runs through a groove that I made, and the pulley wheel sits on that nail. Okay, it's also epoxied in as well. Now for reloads, I have a piece of PVC tube, which was also quartered. And it fits pieces that are 5/8 of an inch. And here I have some yucca. Now we're not going to do any more experimenting with wood hardnesses. We've already done that. So we did that with working our way up. We're going from lower density to higher density, but not with the pump drill. Again, the pump drill is not really for that function. It's really for ease. So you have to have a low to medium density wood, really. I mean, you could probably work and experiment at getting harder woods to go, but we're not doing that with the pump drill today. So when we get to toggle drill next, we're going to get to an extreme wood hardnesses. All right? But we're not doing that right now. Right now I'm just kind of jazzing, playing around with different kinds of ways to have mass on your spindle for centrifugal force for the back and forth motion. Okay. Again, our pump drill is unipolar and it has a bilateral force. So I'm going to mate the pump drill to one of these reloading bases, and I'm going to demonstrate right here on the reloading base, getting a call with pump drill made with a pulley wheel, with an oak dowel, PVC reloading socket insert, and yucca reload. Alright, be right back. Alright, so we're going to go over how to make a reloading base. Okay? Now the first place I want you to start from is making your reloads. Your reloading base is going to be measured based on your reloads. Now, after you made one or two reloading bases in the reloads, you can make them any way you want. I mean, customize it, make changes, find what works for you. This is the one that works for me. This is the one that I like. So from there you can make it any way you like. But we need to start somewhere. So this will be the foundation of you learning how to do this, and you can move on from there. So I picked pine studs because they're basically universal no matter where you go. Again, we're under the assumption that you're not near nature. We're not going to start with natural materials. They're harder for people to actually begin with. So we're going to get some skill and some knowledge under your belt. Then you can go out into nature and make it whichever way you like. Okay? But we're going to start from a universal place, and that's kind of the hardware store. So we'll start with our standard pine stud, which is 2x4, which, as you know, is 3.5 by 1.5. Okay. That pine stud that I asked you to get, which was straight grained and fairly free of knots, I want you to cut up into 12-foot sections, okay, or approximately thereabouts. They won't be, because the reloads you're going to cut, because we're doing reloads first. The reloads you're going to cut, you're always going to end up with some kind of extra that is always kind of left over. So it really doesn't matter. So you really need to do this on a table saw. So get your standard table saw. Your table saw hopefully has a guiding wall that latches in. So the quickest and what I think is the easiest way to measure the sizes that you need right off the bat, okay, is to take your 12-inch cut pine stud, which is straight. By the way, your table saw should be unplugged and off at this stage. Put your pine stud right up against the blade. Here's the blade. Put your pine stud right up against the blade. Okay? And then take your guiding wall and just kind of tap it up against so that they kind of fit together. Don't push it so that it's a really tight fit. You don't want that. Okay, you want a bit of room here. So this is 1.5 on top. So we're going to lock that in. And now when we go to cut, it's going to be a square cut. It's going to be 1.5 by 1.5. Okay. Then you're going to take your pine stud. You're going to run them down this way. Okay? You're just going to run them down. And I recommend, that you batch all this work all together. So take all your 12-inch pine studs and just run them all down until you get your sections. Okay? Get all that done first, and then from that point on, we'll actually cut out the reloads down to the around 5/8 of an inch or 1/2 an inch or whatever that'll be. Okay, we'll do that next, but first do this. Plug in your table saw, put on your safety glasses, get your gloves on, get your push stick. You should always have a push stick. You shouldn't be putting your fingers near the blade, okay? And go in. In the emergency room, we would always have the do-it-yourselfers come in with chopped up hands from table saws, especially from the gloves. The gloves get caught in the saw, which actually pulls their hand into the saw, and their hand gets all eaten up. So don't make that mistake. Always have a push stick. And if you don't know how to operate a table saw, ask someone who does. Alright, so let's do that, and then I'll show you the next part, the next measurement, and the next cut. Okay, let's go. Alright, so after you've done that, and hopefully you've done that very safely without any kind of injury or problems, for our next part, you can see here we have a good pile of pieces that we've just cut. Okay, they should be 1.5 by 1.5 by 3.5. Okay, hopefully these ones are fairly free of knots, but as you go to cut these into the smaller sections, any piece that you don't like, you could figure out a way to just remove. So our next part is, you could do this on either your table saw again, or if you have a bandsaw that has a guiding wall to be able to cut these out, that would be very helpful. You can even eyeball it if you're very careful. So if on the jigsaw, if you on the bandsaw, if you're very careful. For the table saw, you definitely need the guiding wall. So we're going to cut these into sections of 5 by 8. Now, why not 1/2 an inch? Why not 3/4 of an inch? Well, I think that 1/2 an inch is actually a little too short. And I think that 3/8 of an inch is actually a little too high. I think 5/8, which is right in between, is actually, in my opinion, the better size for a reload, or for a base, in a sense. So, maybe a while back, I had asked you to get a set of dowels of different sizes. Well, hopefully one of those dowel sizes is 5/8 of an inch. You could actually take that and do the same thing we did with the pine stud. Take that 5/8 inch dowel, and your table saw should be unplugged and off, definitely. Put that dowel up against the blade and tap your guiding wall so that it's not too tight up against the dowel on the blade. Lock that in, take your dowel out, and now you have a 5/8 of an inch space. Okay? And then we're going to take these and we're just going to run them down this way. And you're definitely going to be using a push stick. You're definitely going to be using a good size push stick with this one. Okay? Again, have your safety glasses on, wear your gloves, be careful your gloves aren't too big and too loose, it doesn't get caught in the saw, and So we're going to cut this whole pile down. Again, do them in batches. Do all your cuts like this first, and then do all your 5/8 inch cuts next. Alright, so I'm going to do this, make another pile, and we're going to come right back. Okay. Alright, so I chose to do my 5/8 cut on my bandsaw. So my bandsaw didn't come with a guiding wall. So what I did was I measured out 5/8 of an inch away from the blade, and I took a small section of wood and I secured that down to the saw, and I cut out all my little 5/8 inch pieces that way. Now I chose the bandsaw over the table saw really for safety reasons. I mean, what table saw doesn't scare anybody? So there's a lot more control with the bandsaw. The cuts are more fine. You have a lot more control. So I did it on the bandsaw. You're going to end up with a lot of sawdust everywhere. Okay. Now, when you saw me finish with the table saw, I had already cleaned up all the sawdust, so that's probably not an accurate description of what things look like when you're done. But here, you know, there's sawdust everywhere. I got a huge pile of 1 by 1 by 1.5 by 5/8. And basically I have now enough here to last me probably over a year. Now, since I teach like scouts and things like that, this is going to last me through a whole lot of demos. And then there's the reject pile over here of pieces that have cracks, have knots, and so all that's going to go in like my wood stove for burning. But we're not done yet. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is these have a whole lot of splinters and pieces sticking off of them. So the next thing I want to do is clean these up, round them off. So I'm going to get my belt sander, and I'm quickly going to round off the edges on these things. Not make them look perfect, but just kind of clean them up and make them nicer to look at, easier to manage, and not have stuff sticking out all over the place, and get rid of all the splinters. Alright, so I'm going to do that next, and we're going to come back. Alright, so here I am in the middle of cleaning up and rounding off all of these reloads. So I want to show you my routine for getting through this really quickly. Okay, so I'll take your basic 1.5 by 1.5 by 5/8. Okay, we'll call this side 1. Now you don't have to do this at all. This is just for explanation purposes. So side 1 and side 2. Now the first thing I'll do is with my belt sander is I'll lay it flat to clean up one side, okay, and then I'll lay it flat to clean up the other, okay, real quick. I mean, just basically 1, 2, literally, okay. Then I'm going to do the corners of one side. So let's say I'm going to do side 1, all right. I'm going to do all the sides of side 1, then I'm going to flip it over, do all the sides of side 2, and then what I'm going to do is walk it on the belt. So what I do is I hold it between my thumb and my middle finger, and I basically walk with my index finger. I'll walk it down the belt like it's on a treadmill, okay, at the health club gym, okay, to do the corners. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this on the belt real quick to kind of show you how I go about doing that, okay? So it'll be a little noisy. Here we go. So I'm going to lay it down each side, do the 4 sides on one side, flip it over, do the 4 sides on the other, and then walk it on the belt, and it'll be all nice and clean. And then I throw it in my bucket of finished reloads. Okay, here we go. And there you go. It's clean up on both sides. All of the sides are rounded off without splinters, and the corners have no splinters, and just makes it a better piece to handle, not just to look at but to deal with. Okay, and it doesn't lose its ability to fit inside the reloading base as a puzzle piece. Okay, and then that goes in the bucket wherever you're doing it. So as you can see, I got a whole bunch more to go through. I'm going to go do that, and then I'll be set for probably over a year to ever have to do this again. And then we'll be right back. So here we have our reject pile of stuff that's split or has a bad knot in it or stuff like that. So here we have an entire bucket that's filled halfway with reloads that are all nice and cleaned up. Okay, and ready to go. So now that you've done this, you can make these out of any kind of wood. So you can make it out of, cedar fence posts, or whatever wood it is that you have that's quite abundant. If you want to start practicing with a few hardwoods, you could make these efficiently and put them on your reloading base. Or if you're going to end up doing a lot of demos, make it with some kind of wood that is of a medium hardness that you can demonstrate with and have a lot of to just go through, and have a lot extra for people to try as well, because it's hard to keep your hands off trying to do a method, and kids are very excited to try and do them. So alright, so now we're going to move on to the making the reloading base itself. And I'm just going to show you one example of how I do it, and then you could take it from there, alright, as to however you want it designed. Alright, onto the reloading base.